Good afternoon. My name is Greg Maisel, and on behalf of the International March of the Living, I want to thank you for attending this afternoon's Yom HaShoah ceremony. As is the custom, please refrain from applauding during this solemn ceremony. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, a day of sacred remembrance observed by Jewish communities all over the world. Close to 300,000 alumni of the March of the Living have marched here for over 34 years. And today, for the first time since the outbreak of the global pandemic in early 2020, thousands of people have once again assembled here to take part in the March of the Living, from Auschwitz to Birkenau, the largest Jewish graveyard in the world, in commemoration of the 6 million Jews and the millions of other innocent victims murdered in Europe during the Shoah.
B7608. This was our name and this was our number. I was only known by the number.
Between February 1942 and December 1942, 600,000 Jews were murdered. Young people, old people, children from all over Europe.
I never had one day that I was happy here. All the time it was vicious and starvation. It was horrendous.
The children crying and the mothers screaming, "Almighty God, help us," still ring in my ears today.
Sharing our stories, it's keeping the history alive.
Just for a few minutes I had this surreal feeling of standing here and talking about all the people that lived here.
It's no good living with hate. It doesn't help you. You eat yourself up.
What was done can be undone, unfortunately. And we only hope that nothing like this will happen again.
Doesn't matter what religion they are, what race they are. Whoever comes to me and needs help, I will help. And this is basically my way of living.
Surviving is a gift. And what I do with that gift is to share the story because it makes a difference to people to hear it directly from us.
The video that you have just seen was taken from New Take Films, who joined our survivors in Poland for a moving documentary called Why We March. I would like to welcome the 7 Holocaust survivors who are on the stage from the United Kingdom and who are with us this year as we light the Iskor torch, the torch of memory. Arik Hirsch, Alfred Garwood, Agnes Kaposi, Mala Tribic, Eve Kugler, Harry Olmer, and Barbara Frankis. Thank you. Thank you for your bravery and courage, and for keeping the torch of Holocaust memory alive. They will be accompanied on the stage by Dr. Shmuel Rosenman, Chair of the International March of the Living, who will recite the Iskor in Hebrew. Please rise.
יזכור אלוהים את נשמות אחינו בני ישראל חללי השואה וגיבוריה, נשמות 600 רבבות אלפי ישראל שהומתו ושנהרגו ושנחנקו ושנקברו חיים, ואת קהילות הקודש שנחרבו על קדושת השם. יזכור אלוהים את עקדתם עם עקדת שאר קדושי ישראל וגיבוריו מימי עולם, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם, הנאהבים והנעימים בחייהם ובמותם לא נפרדו. ינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
May God remember the souls of our brothers and sisters, the children of Israel, the victims of the Holocaust and its heroes, the souls of 6 million Jews who were murdered, suffocated, buried alive, and the holy communities martyred, sanctifying God's name. May God remember their sacrifice, together with the remainder of Israel from generations past. May their souls be bound in the bonds of life, beloved and cherished in their lives, in their deaths. They were not parted. May they rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen.
Thank you all. Can you please be seated? The March of the Living would like to recognize the immeasurable suffering that is taking place not far from here in neighboring Ukraine, where thousands of innocent civilians have been killed or wounded and millions have become refugees overnight. We encourage you all to assist the people of Ukraine during this international humanitarian crisis, as many have already done. At this point, I would like to recognize President Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland, who is attending today's march and whose country is leading the global effort in assisting refugees from Ukraine. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of a number of Ukrainian refugees who are joining us today on the march. Please rise for a minute of silence for the victims of the war in Ukraine. Please be seated. I would now like to call upon Phyllis Greenberg Heidemann, President of the International March of the Living, to address you on behalf of the organization.
Your Excellency, President Duda, our precious survivors, our honored dignitaries, our dear friends, we are graced today by your presence. On Yom HaShoah 1988, and almost every year thereafter, leadership of the International March of the Living gather here on these hallowed grounds. They come to bear witness. They come to honor the past. They come from countries around the globe, and they speak every language known to mankind. But as they gather here in Auschwitz-Birkenau, they speak only one language. That, my friends, is the language of memory. And this is the language in which I hope to speak to you today. Much of our global leadership is unable, for several reasons, to join us today. They are unable to bring their students to accompany them on our journey of memory. But I know that they are watching us virtually. And to each of you around the globe, I say, hello, shalom, hola, dzień dobry, salam, a guten tag, ciao, bonjour, good day, sveki, konnichiwa, yasu, alo, salo, and shalom aleichem. These languages of hello represent the countries where our delegates are usually joined with us, encompassing these entire grounds. We miss them. As the very proud president of this emotionally motivated and time-tested organization, driven by the memory of those who never left this place, or so many others like it, I am honored and I am humbled to represent our chairman, our founders, our board of directors, and each and every one of our most beloved survivors, devoted leaders, educators, clergy, alumni, chaperones, and guides from around the globe to make this promise on their behalf, on our collective behalf. We will always remember, and we will always stand united in our mission to honor the past as we embrace the future. I believe that it is incumbent upon each one of us to look to the past as we prepare to face tomorrow. Learning the lessons of history is an important step in accepting social responsibility, moral responsibility to the future. That giant step is not always easy, especially in the face of rampant anti-Semitism, bigotry, hatred, and all forms of discrimination. But perhaps, just perhaps, we should consider this. If it were easy, everyone would do it. And we know that everyone does not undertake the privilege to serve. While we recognize that everyone does not strive to host the mantle of memory, bear the title of torchbearer, or even promote peace amongst the peoples of the world, our leadership, our colleagues, and our alumni have pledged to do all they can do to be agents of change, agents of good, and agents of memory. The International March of the Living is proud to embrace, to engage, and to educate those who will carry on as the next generation of leaders of society. Even today, under the current humanitarian crisis surrounding us, we have kept our promise to those on whose shoulders we stand. Not a global pandemic nor a raging war will deter our honored role as torchbearers of memory, nor our commitment to our ancestors who rest here. We shall not forget you. To those blessed to survive and share with us your stories, your lessons, we thank you. We shall remember your words of wisdom, your guidance, your unsurpassed strength, and we shall always remember you. Today, on Yom HaShoah 2022, we, the older generations of leaders, not just of the March of the Living, but of all society, invite the next generation to accept your social and your collective responsibility to inherit, to embrace, and to proudly carry the torch of memory into the future, as together we will face the unknowns of tomorrow. It is you who can change the course of history. It is you, the next generation, who must become voices for the witnesses. It is you on whom the future rests. In each of your hands, you hold the magic to make a difference. On behalf of the International March of the Living, I wish the next generation B'Hatzlacha. May you go from strength to strength and lead this world into an even better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I would now like to invite President Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland, to the stage to address us. He will be accompanied by Dr. Shmuel Rosenman.
Czcigodni ocalali, wielce szanowna Pani Prezes, Panie Przewodniczący Marszu Żywych, wielce szanowny Panie Burmistrzu Jerozolimy wraz z małżonką, Ekscelencje, czcigodni rabini, wszyscy dostojni przybyli goście, wielce szanowni uczestnicy Marszu Żywych, w tym nasi drodzy przyjaciele z Ukrainy. Wszyscy szanowni Państwo.
Honorable survivors, distinguished Madam President, distinguished Mr. Chairman of the March of the Living, distinguished Mr. Mayor of Jerusalem, along with your spouse, Excellencies, distinguished rabbis, distinguished guests, esteemed participants of the March of the Living, our dear guests from Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen.
Wymowa tego wydarzenia, jakim jest Marsz Żywych, jest niezwykle poruszająca. Jest zawsze bardzo głębokim przeżyciem.
The significance of this event, which is the March of the Living, is extremely moving. It is always a very deep and profound experience.
Ale zarazem, choć temu marszowi zawsze towarzyszy zaduma i żałoba, jest to jednak wydarzenie życia. Jest to wydarzenie zwycięstwa życia.
But also, although this march is always invariably accompanied by reflection and mourning, this is the march of life. This is the victory of life.
Ci, którzy idą w tym marszu, pokazują, że nawet najgorszy totalitaryzm, jakim był niemiecki hitleryzm, nazizm, który chciał zniszczyć, wymordować cały naród żydowski i zniszczyć tysiące, dziesiątki innych narodów, nie jest w stanie zwyciężyć woli życia i woli trwania.
Those walking in this march show that even the worst totalitarianism, even the worst Hitler-Nazism is not able to destroy, it is not able to murder the entire nation, just as it is not able to destroy and annihilate other nations, that the willingness to live is something that is overwhelming.
Idąc tu między wami z obozu Auschwitz do obozu Birkenau, czułem głęboką odpowiedzialność reprezentacji polskiego narodu i Polaków, także w tym znaczeniu historycznym.
And when I was walking among you from Auschwitz to Birkenau, I felt a very deep and profound sense of responsibility while representing the Polish nation and Poles, also from the perspective of history.
Polaków także i w tym państwowym, administracyjnym tego słowa znaczeniu, po prostu polskich obywateli.
Poles also in the administrative state sense of the word, simply speaking the citizens of Poland, Polish citizens.
Bo trzeba pamiętać, że tutaj w obozie Zagłady Auschwitz-Birkenau ginęli polscy obywatele narodowości żydowskiej, ale oczywiście także i narodowości polskiej. W sumie w czasie II wojny światowej Polska, moja ojczyzna, straciła 6 milionów obywateli, z czego ponad 3 miliony obywateli to byli polscy Żydzi. Polscy Żydzi bezlitośnie mordowani przez nazistów.
But I also need to remind you, and one needs to bear in mind, that here in the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, Polish citizens, citizens of Jewish nations, but citizens of Polish nation as well, were those who perished. And all in all, during the Second World War, Poland lost 6 million citizens. And among that number, more than 3 million Polish Jews who were ruthlessly murdered by the Nazi Germans.
Szedł ze mną dzisiaj, czy może odwrotnie, ja szedłem dzisiaj obok pana Edwarda Mosberga, który urodził się w Krakowie, tak jak 47 lat później ja, też urodzony w Krakowie, niedaleko stąd. I tylko dlatego, że urodził się w żydowskiej rodzinie, tylko dlatego, że jest polskim Żydem, niemieccy naziści postanowili odebrać mu życie i jako młodego chłopca wraz z rodziną zamknęli go w obozie koncentracyjnym po to, by go zabić.
And today I walked next to Mr. Edward Mosberg. Edward Mosberg, who was born in Kraków, the same city that I was born in 47 years later. It is close from here. And he was brought here along with his family to this camp only because he was born in a Jewish family, only because he was Polish Jew. Only for that reason, German Nazis decided to take his life and incarcerate him along with his family in this concentration camp to kill him.
Mam głębokie poczucie, że szedłem dzisiaj w Marszu Pamięci także takich właśnie polskich obywateli jak on. W ich imieniu, bo z różnych przyczyn dzisiaj być ich tutaj nie może. Dlatego, że zginęli zamordowani przez Niemców, dlatego, że po prostu odeszli i nie ma ich już dzisiaj z nami. Tym bardziej drogocenna jest obecność wszystkich ocalałych.
And when I was walking here in this march of the living, I also had a very deep sense that I was representing all the Polish citizens just like him, just like Mr. Edward Mosberg. Because many of them could not be here today for many different reasons. Some of them were murdered by the Germans. Others passed away, and they could not be here with us anymore. That is why the presence of all the survivors is even more valuable for us today.
Dziękuję panu przewodniczącemu Marszu Żywych i pani prezes Marszu Żywych, że w swoich wystąpieniach na początku marszu i tutaj wspomnieli o rosyjskiej napaści na Ukrainę, o cierpieniu dzisiaj ukraińskiego narodu i o tym, że są dzisiaj z nami tutaj nasi goście z Ukrainy, ale tak naprawdę uchodźcy, ci, którzy uciekli przed wojną, przed śmiercią z rąk rosyjskich najeźdźców.
Thank you very much to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to you, Madam President of the March of the Living, for mentioning in your speeches, both those at the beginning of today's event, as well as here, just a couple of minutes ago, about Russian aggression against Ukraine, about suffering of the Ukrainian nation. We have them with us here today, guests from Ukraine, but as a matter of fact, they are refugees who fled war, who fled death from the hands of Russian invaders.
Mówię o tym dlatego, że to jest nie tylko wojna. Mówię o tym, bo przecież zawsze powtarzamy, że potępiamy wszelką nienawiść, że jesteśmy w Marszu Żywych i upamiętniamy pamięć ofiar Holokaustu po to, by nigdy więcej na świecie nic takiego się nie zdarzyło.
And I'm saying this because this is not only the war. We always keep repeating that we condemn all forms of hatred, that we march in this March of the Living, commemorating the victims of the Holocaust, just to make sure that it never happens again in the world.
Mówimy o tym wszyscy z głębokim przekonaniem i wiemy doskonale, że tamta straszliwa zbrodnia, niewyobrażalna, wzięła się z nienawiści. Nienawiści zaszczepionej narodowi niemieckiemu.
And we are saying with deep conviction, and we know perfectly well that horrendous, that horrible crime of the Holocaust stemmed from hatred that originated or was imposed onto the German nation.
Narodowi o przecież wielkiej kulturze i wielkiej historii. Trudno sobie to w ogóle wyobrazić.
A nation of great culture and grand history. This is hard to imagine at all.
Tak samo dzisiaj z niedowierzaniem słuchamy i czytamy stenogramy rozmów, jakie prowadzą zwykli Rosjanie ze swoimi krewnymi, żołnierzami walczącymi na Ukrainie w związku z rosyjską napaścią, w związku z rosyjską agresją.
And also today, it fills us with disbelief when we listen to or we read the conversations between Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine with their relatives back in Russia. All those conversations which are connected with Russian aggression, with Russian invasion of Ukraine.
To są rozmowy zwykłych ludzi i w tych rozmowach przebija nienawiść. Często pojawiają się stwierdzenia, że trzeba wytępić Ukraińców.
And those are the conversations of ordinary people, led among ordinary people. But what you hear first and foremost in those conversations is hatred. Quite often you can hear statements that the Ukrainian people have to be wiped out.
Trudno to w ogóle zrozumieć i trudno w to w ogóle uwierzyć. Jak można po czymś takim, co przeżył naród żydowski, po czymś takim, co przeżyły w czasie II wojny światowej inne narody, Polacy, Romowie, Sinti, Rosjanie także że dzisiaj można zachować się w ten sposób, że dzisiaj po tym, jak tyle razy tutaj rosyjscy przywódcy przemawiali dumni z tego, że Armia Czerwona wyzwoliła obóz Auschwitz, że mogli zbombardować Babi Jar, miejsce kaźni ukraińskich Żydów w czasie II wojny światowej, gdzie dzisiaj spoczywają dziesiątki tysięcy pomordowanych. Tam spadły rosyjskie bomby. Jak to możliwe?
And it is really hard to understand. It is hard to believe after everything that the Jewish nation has gone through, after all that other nations went through in the Second World War, nations such as Poles, Roma, Sinti, but also Russians. It is so hard to believe that somebody can behave in such a way today. Russian leaders spoke many times here. They expressed their pride that the Red Army liberated Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And after all that, bombs have been dropped on Babin Yar, the place of torment of thousands of Ukrainian Jews, the place where their remains are laid to rest. Tens of thousands of people were murdered there. How is that possible at all?
Przychodzimy tutaj, w to miejsce, idziemy w tym marszu po to, by uczcić pamięć, oddać hołd pomordowanym, ale tak, żeby pokazać, że państwo Izrael i naród żydowski nie tylko istnieje, ale ma prawo do istnienia.
And we come here, we come to this place, we walk in the March of the Living to commemorate those murdered, also to pay tribute to those murdered, but also to show in a very clear way that the state of Israel and the Israeli nation still exist, and even more to say, they have got the right to exist.
Przychodzimy tutaj po to, żeby pokazać, że o ile w czasie II wojny światowej Niemcom hitlerowskim udało się zetrzeć mój kraj, Polskę z mapy, wymazać ją i mordować Polaków, także Żydów polskich, nigdy więcej nie dopuścimy, by coś takiego tutaj się powtórzyło. Właśnie dlatego dbamy o to miejsce pamięci.
And we come here to show that unlike in the Second World War, where Nazi Germans just wiped out Polish people, the inhabitants of my country, Poland, they just wiped it out from the map. Then they murdered Poles, also Polish Jews. But we come here exactly to show that it is never, ever going to happen again, that we are never going to allow it happening.
Jesteśmy dzisiaj tutaj także po to, aby pokazać, że absolutnie nie ma zgody wobec próby odebrania wolności i bezkarnego zabijania narodu ukraińskiego, tak jak to się dzisiaj dzieje na okupowanych terenach Ukrainy.
And exactly for that reason, we are taking care in Poland of sites such as this. But also, we are here to show and to demonstrate that it is unacceptable to us that freedom should be taken away from the Ukrainian nation, that members of the Ukrainian nation should be killed with impunity in the occupied territories of Ukraine.
Jesteśmy tutaj, żeby pokazać, że każdy naród ma święte prawo do życia, ma święte prawo do kultywowania swoich tradycji, ma święte prawo do rozwoju.
And we are here to show that every single nation has got a sacred right to life. Every single nation has got a sacred life to cultivate their traditions and to develop.
I krzyczymy głośno: nie dla nienawiści, nie dla antysemityzmu, nie dla antyukrainizmu, nie dla antypolonizmu, nie dla nienawiści.
And we shout out loud here, no to hatred, no to anti-Semitism, no to anti-Ukrainism, no to anti-Polonism, no to hatred.
Nigdy się z tym nie pogodzimy, nigdy się z tym nie zgodzimy i zawsze będziemy zwalczać to ze wszystkich sił.
We will never come to terms with that. We are never going to agree to that. And we are always going to fight with all the might we have in order to counter it.
Kto tego nie rozumie, dlatego nie ma miejsca w społeczności międzynarodowej uczciwych państw i narodów.
And who does not understand that entity, that person has no place among international community of honest people and honest nations.
Kto morduje, kto łamie prawo międzynarodowe, musi za to ponieść twardą i bezwzględną odpowiedzialność.
The one who murders, the one who violates international law, has to be brought to accountability for that and has to accept severe punishment.
Nigdy więcej wojny, nigdy więcej Holokaustu, wieczna pamięć pomordowanym.
Never again war, never again Holocaust. May the memory of those murdered live on eternally.
Wieczna pamięć wszystkim ofiarom nienawiści.
May the memory of all the victims of hatred live on eternally.
Thank you. We will just wait for the President to take his place in the audience before proceeding. Please turn your attention to the screen for a short message from the President of the State of Israel, President Isaac Yitzhak Herzog.
Dear friends, Achayot ve'Achim Yekarim, 3 years ago I was here, leading the delegation of the Jewish Agency for Israel. I marched alongside Jews and non-Jews to remember the millions murdered in the Shoah. We marched to salute the martyrs of the Holocaust and the uprisings. We marched to commemorate the righteous amongst the nations, those who risked their lives for ours. We marched to honor the sheer heroism and perseverance of the precious survivors. We marched and we cried, and we cried and we cried. For the past 2 years, we took a step back from the hall. We grieved in our homes and connected through screens and Zooms, but today, thank God, I speak to you from Jerusalem, the capital of the Jewish Democratic State of Israel, when you are there in the camp, marching again. We march to mourn, to remember, and to declare that the death marches of 80 years ago will never happen again and will never be forgotten. The March of the Living is far more than a symbolic gesture. Commemorating the Holocaust is the duty of every person, of every nation across the globe. And it is our generation's obligation to deeply, existentially remember, is to act on behalf of those who cannot. It is to speak up against anti-Semitism, hatred, bigotry, or racism. It is to align our moral compass, to insert compassion, tzedakah v'chesed, and to see the image of God in every human being. The State of Israel, established in the wake of the Holocaust, as a guarantee that the Jewish people always have a home, will act to ensure Jews will never again be refugees. We will exert every effort to enable every single Jew in the world to live a proud, free, safe Jewish life. We will combat the trivialization of the truth and prevent alternative facts from replacing history. We will not allow the world to forget the depth of human cruelty executed by the Nazis and their collaborators. And we will march again next year. May we all succeed in passing the torch to the next generations. And allow me, dear friends, to thank the President of Poland, Mr. Duda, and his government, as well as the leadership of the organization from all over the world, the March of the Living organization, as well as the leadership from Israel. Some of our friends, unfortunately, have left us this year, including the founder, Abraham Herzog. But our spirit goes on. May we all march together and again and again, and continue to say, Am Israel Chai. 'Am Yisrael Chai. 'Thank you. 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 '
President Duda will be leaving us now for a prior engagement. We would like to thank you once again for honoring us with your presence